Okay, so for yin today, you won't need any props. If you have some, grab them. The most you'll need are a block or two, but maybe not even in that. So you'll come to a wide-legged seat. I'm turning to face you. If you're on a surface where you want your heels on the mat, then turn to the side, back up, and make sure your heels are on the mat. You're not bringing the legs as wide as you possibly can. So think about bringing them in a little bit so it's not your widest seat. And then from here, you'll grab onto the back of the right thigh, bring the foot in, but we're not taking the sole of the foot all the way over to the other leg. You really just want it to be center of the body. So toes pointing straight forward. So there's a big gap between the sole of my foot and the inner left thigh. Then from here, sit up tall. So one leg is bent, one leg is straight. You're sitting up tall. You're just going to bring the torso straight forward any amount. It's yin. Keep it gentle. So start to walk the hands forward. Let the head and the neck go. And you're in your first pose, which is half butterfly. I'll give you some options while you're in here, just in case any of these make sense for you. So if you have anything going on in that right knee, this is where a block could help. You can put a block underneath the right knee for support. That's also if you feel too much pulling in that inner right thigh, that could be nice to have a block underneath you. And if you don't have a block and you're feeling those things, move the foot more forward, the right foot more forward away from the body. So the closer the right foot is into the body, toward the center of the body, heel toward the center of the body, the more intense this is. And these are longer holds. So we spend time in them with less effort. And that's really where you have to listen to your own body and figure out, how long can I stay in this pose without a struggle, with more ease? What adjustments do I need to make? Once you start feeling comfortable in the shape, a release starts to happen. Take a deeper breath in through the nose. Back out through the mouth. 2 more like that one. Deep breath in. Exhale out through the mouth. Inhale in through the nose. Exhale so slowly out through the mouth. This time in through the nose. Right back out through the nose. Keep going with this breath. And you'll walk the hands back in. So you're bringing the torso back up to seated. Use the hands to move the legs. So grab onto the back of the right thigh, extend that leg back out. You'll just switch sides. Use the hands, grab onto the left thigh, grab the foot. Sole of the foot is away from the leg and the toes are pointing straight forward, trying to get that heel center with the body as best we can. Sit up tall. Keep this length in the spine as you start to walk the hands forward, maybe closing the eyes as you come into it so you can feel what's happening in your own body. Try to hang on to that same breath. And poses are often different side to side. That's happening for you. You just collect that information, file it away without any judgment. Just know that about yourself. Last few breaths here. Start to walk the hands in toward the body, coming back up to seated. Grab onto the back of the left thigh, extend that leg out. So you're back to your wide legged seat. Toes are pointing up, knees are pointing up. Still not as wide as you can go, but we're starting to open up the lower body. This time we'll just fold straight forward between the legs, start to walk the hands forward. You don't need to come down that low. You could use blocks if you have them underneath the hands, head, forearms, whatever you want to do. But don't go all the way into your deepest variation of this shape. So make sure you leave some room so that you can fall in a little deeper into the pose over time without any effort. Make sure your knees and toes are still pointing up. Sometimes as we relax into the shape, they start to fall forward. And walk yourself back in. So you come back to seated. Once you get there, you'll grab onto the backs of the thighs. This time we're bringing both soles of the feet together, coming into that butterfly shape, Baddha Konasana. So same thing here, closer in the feet are toward the body. The more intense this is, farther out, it's a little bit more gentle. So find that space where we're going to hold this the same amount of time we did all the other shapes. So once you have it, you can grab onto the shins, ankles, maybe inner edges of the feet if it's easy to reach. Hug the femurs, the thigh bones into the hip socket. It'll help you get the knees down a little bit lower. Sit up tall. Start to hinge forward. Maybe the elbows flare out. They don't have to. It just depends on how low you get with the chest. Find an easy place for your body to be in. Once you get there, close the eyes, let the head and the neck go. Start to breathe into the pose. So we did half of this shape to start, opening up the inner thighs, the hips, all the lower body joints. Sometimes it's nice to start with half of the shape on each side before you come into the full shape. You might get in a little deeper. And you'll bring yourself back up to seated, nice and slow. Use the hands to bring the knees back together. Bring the hands back behind you so you're reclined. Separate the feet wide, turning the toes out, and bring the knees side to side. So dynamic movement, windshield wipers. And you can play with how deep you bring the knees down toward the mat. That's a nice hip opening in itself, internal and external hip rotation happening on each leg. especially coming out of those longer holds. Okay, so you'll finish up the cycle that you're on. You'll come to lying down on your stomach. So keep the forearms underneath you just so the chest is lifted. You can bring the forearms down first, walk the feet back, set the hips down, tops of the feet down. And then once you get here, it looks like Sphinx pose, but we're going to change it. So you'll bring the hands in. So one forearm is in front of the other. Look down at the mat. Try to get the chin to line up right above that top forearm. So it's more like the forearms are underneath the chest and shoulders, not the neck. Start to walk the hands away from one another. So you're crossing the arms. And now you'll start to feel some space being created across the shoulder blade. So this is a shoulder opening. All of us will be in a different place with the head. Maybe your head's just right where it needs to be. Some of you might be able to get the head down a little bit lower, and maybe the chin hooks just on top of the arm. That's why we wanted the arms back. And if you feel like you can go a little deeper in, you can. If you feel like you can overcommitted, then bring the elbows a little closer in toward the center of the mat. Once you have it, close the eyes. Start to breathe into that space across the upper back, which can collect a lot of tension in our day-to-day lives. And if this is a tight area of the body, this pose might be more of a struggle. I'll give you one other option, especially if you're dealing with any shoulder stuff. You could bring the arms out like a cactus shape, elbows in line with the shoulders, and just turn the head to one side. And this can be a really nice, gentle shoulder opening if you're dealing with an injury. You'll start to lift the head back up, walk the elbows back in, and same thing other side. So just bring the other forearm in front, walk them back, try to line up the chin so it's ahead of the front forearm, and start to move the hands away from you, crossing the arms up pretty high. Find a place where you can rest in the shape, let the head and the neck go, close the eyes, start to settle in. You felt what happened on the first side, trying to get to the same place on the second side without rushing, just knowing that it takes time. And lift the head back up, walk the elbows back in, turn the hands to face forward. So fingertips are pointing toward the top of the mat. Two options for your next back bend. So you're already in one. This is Sphinx pose. Elbows are right underneath the shoulders. Chest is pushing forward. You broaden across the collarbones and look down the bridge of the nose. So this is option A. If you want to play with option B, it's melting heart pose. So you bring the hands to the mat, come up to hands and knees. With the knees on the mat, you want to keep the thighs vertical. So hips right over the knees, belly in, bring the forearms down to the mat. Walk the elbows forward ahead of the shoulders without taking the hips with you. Forehead comes down to the mat. So both are great back bends. If you have a preference, pick one. If you're not sure, maybe try melting heart pose, the one I'm in now. Once you get there, hug the belly in and lengthen the lower back. If you feel like the elbows are too far forward or need to go more forward, you can make those adjustments. You want to feel like the torso, the sides of the waist feel long. And the hugging in of the belly is important for every back bend, really, especially for melting heart pose, because sometimes some of us with a really flexible lower back like to sink the belly down toward the mat, and that's too much strain on the lower back. So when you hug it in, you feel that length start to happen. And if you're feeling like the upper body is opening up more, I'll give you one more option, only for melting heart pose. So your forehead's down on the mat. You bring the hands together like prayer, and hands can go back behind the head. You usually know right away if it's a good idea or a bad idea. So if it's not a good one, then just bring the hands back down. If it's feeling good, maybe you have more room to walk the elbows forward, getting some more length on the sides of the torso. If you have the hands back behind the head, bring them back down to the mat. Walk the elbows back in so they're underneath the shoulders, and we'll all come to hands and knees. So no matter which back bend you chose, come up to hands and knees. Once you get there, we'll be on the knees for this next one. So if you're on a hard surface like me, you may want to take the front of the mat, fold it in, and then bring the knees on top of that folded mat. If you have enough padding underneath the knees, you can stay there. Toes will be tucked. If you have blocks, there's an option to use them. You don't need to use them though if you don't have any. You'll bring the blocks on the tallest height, right outside the ankle bone on each side. So your feet, if you can see my feet, they're sticking out behind the block. You don't want them to go next to the feet. So you're up, standing on the knees. We're coming into one more back bend. We open up the shoulders and the front side of the body to come into this one. So you'll bring the hands to the lower back. Fingertips can point down. Hug the outer elbows in. So we just created all that space in the upper back. Make sure your shoulders are still away from the ears so the neck feels long. And then lift the inner thighs up, lift the belly up, keep hugging the outer elbows in. Chest can lift up. We keep the hips over the knees the whole time as you bring the chest back. And you can keep the gaze forward. That's a nice place to start. If you really like back bends and you want a little bit of a thrill, you can look up, but that definitely changes things where you look. You want to make sure you keep the back of the neck long and the lower body is supporting you. So you should feel that strength there, as well as the backside of the body. Those muscles are contracting to lift and spread the front side. This brings energy into the body. So you might be feeling that happening. Slowly start to come back up to standing on the knees, chest right over the hips. And then you can untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels, rest. You can bring the hands to the thighs, close the eyes. You start to feel how the heart rate picked up. We don't stay in that one for too long. Believe it or not, Camel Ustrasana is a yin pose. Most intense in my opinion, but depends on what your relationship with back bends are. Okay, so let's do another round. You'll come back up onto the knees. Tucking the toes could be really nice. I'll give you an option to take this one deeper if you want to. Hands come to the lower back, fingertips point down, outer elbows hug in, lift the inner thighs, lift the core, chest starts to open, hips over the knees as you bring the chest back. You can keep the gaze forward. If you have blocks, you can bring the hands to the blocks. If you're feeling really open, you could bring the hands to the heels. Just keep the chest reaching back, hips over the knees. So we don't take the hips back to be able to reach anything. And this should feel like a natural progression. It shouldn't feel like you went too far in. Just keep that breath steady in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. Slowly bring the hands back to the lower back. If you changed that variation, untuck the toes, sit back onto the heels, rest, close the eyes. Hands can rest on the thighs or the heart if you want to feel the heartbeat. Then blink open the eyes. If you folded the mat, unroll it so it's back to its regular length. So hands and knees, bring the knees and the feet all the way together. So knees are touching and inner edges of the feet are touching. Bring the hips back onto the heels, walk the hands forward, and you're coming into a traditional form of child's pose. So we don't have the knees apart, knees are touching, forehead comes down to the mat. Crawl the arms forward, hands forward. Try to keep the shoulders in place. And now you're bringing some space to the lower back. So with the knees all the way together, belly's resting completely on the thighs, not falling between the thighs. And you start to feel that width across the lower back. And this is a nice counter for a back bend. You have that arch happening in the spine. Now you have a slight rounding of the spine. Also, just bringing the forehead down to touch on the mat kicks the cooling response in after an energetic back bend. So it brings you back to a balanced state of mind. And if your knees are uncomfortable, you can always lift the hips up as high as you need to keep the knees quiet. And you'll start to lift the head back up, walk the hands in. You'll bring the feet over to one side to come to seated. So you're coming to seated on the mat. Let's come to a cross-legged seat. We'll bring the left shin in front of the right shin. You can sit side to side a couple of times so you feel even on the sit bone, sitting up tall. So left shin in front of the right shin, you're crossing at mid shin. You want the feet to be more underneath the knees, so not back by the hips. Bring that right hand just to rest in front of the shin or the mat, wherever's comfortable. Left hand back behind you. Sit up tall, looking forward. Start to open the chest to the left, not as deep as you can go. Just go part of the way into the twist. Gaze can start to go in the direction that you're twisting in. We're just doing a seated twist to start to release that back bend. So getting the spine going in all directions for our practice today. Eyes can close or you can look down so that the eyelids are heavy. Just try to keep the chest lifted, especially with these longer holds as you become more relaxed. And another option with that right hand, you can leave it where it is. You could bring the back of the right hand to the left thigh, but only use it to sit up taller. Try not to use it to drive yourself deeper into the twist. So think of it more like a kickstand. You'll start to bring the gaze forward. Try to keep the body in the twist as you bring the gaze forward. You'll feel that release on the neck. Unwind the torso, sit back, switch the crossing of the legs, bring the right shin in front, maybe shift side to side so you feel even on the sit bones. Trying to cross at mid shin, toes pointing forward, feet underneath the knees. Sitting up tall, left hand can rest in front of you, maybe on that right shin or mat. Right hand comes back behind you and start to gently open the chest to the right part of the way, so not as deep as you can go. And this twist should feel good. We just did it on the first side. You've done a couple of back bends. You're starting to feel the work happen in the spine. The spine should feel warm. Gaze can be down or eyes closed. Just try to keep the chest lifted. And there's a pressing down into the sit bones to rise up through the crown of the head. So that keeps that length as you twist. Our posture is so important for our overall health. It does take strength to keep our posture in a good place and practice. Over time, our upper back starts to round, but we can help by staving that off as long as possible. Once the spine starts to round, other things begin to happen within the body, including the eyes bulging. So the eyes start to go forward. The head starts to go forward. So we just keep exploring all the different ways we can move our bodies and all these poses and shapes. So we keep that range of motion, that awareness. Maybe the back of the left hand comes to the right thigh. Try to use it to sit up taller instead of driving you into the twist. So if anything's going to take you into the twist, it's your core. Stay away from going 100% in. Sometimes it's more effort to back off. And bring the gaze back forward. Keep the torso in the twist. Slowly unwind the upper body. Extend the legs out in front of you. Bring the arms up overhead. And as you reach the arms up, press down into the sit bones. Keep the shoulders in place. Arms are firm. Legs are firm. So the backside of the legs are pressing down into the mat. Core is hugging in. Shoulders away from the ears. Feel how long the spine is. Try to keep this as you start to fold forward over the legs, reaching over the toes. Hands will come down to rest on something once you find a good spot for the torso to be. So it could be hands on the mat, legs, feet, blocks. Whatever's right there seems like an obvious place to be. Let the head and the neck go. If you're dealing with any lower back stuff and you want more support, bend the knees so much that you can rest the chest on the thighs, and then you can clasp opposite elbows, let the head and the neck go. And that's a good alternative to having the legs straight out in front of you. If your lower back's fine, keep the legs straight. Let the head and the neck go. Sometimes the legs are tight, so we can't straighten them all the way in this position. And that's fine if you have a natural bend in the knees or just need to bend them to give the back sides of the legs a little bit more space. So starting with the soft version of this shape, whatever that means in your body. Allowing your body to go deeper into the shape as it wants. You start to feel the back side of the body begin to open. And walk yourself back up to seated, lifting the head and the chest. Soles of the feet come to the mat. Scoot yourself forward so that when you lie down, your head's still supported by the mat. Bring the knees in toward the chest. You could rock side to side a little bit. That might feel like a nice massage on the spine. Then we'll take happy baby. So it sounds like an easy pose. You're pretty open for it, but it actually can get kind of intense with a longer hold. So open up the knees wide using the hands. Start by grabbing the backs of the thighs. Keep the knees wider than the torso. If this is comfortable, stay here, but you're trying to find an easy place for your happy baby. So maybe you don't go all the way in. You could grab the backs of the calves, see what that feels like. If it's too much, go back to where you were. If the ankles seem manageable, that could be an option. You don't want the tail to lift. So at a certain point, your tail is going to want to lift so that you can hang on to whatever you have with the hands. So find that balance of keeping the hips down on the mat, knees wide. If it's really easy, you could grab the inner edges of the feet. That's a little bit easier than the outer edges. Or full version, outer edges of the feet. If it feels intense, skip it, back up a step. And maybe you just stay one or two steps from whatever you typically do in your happy baby. Eyes can close. And what's nice about this shape is you feel a spreading of the back as well as the hip opening. So now we're kind of just bringing everything together, especially at the end when we've worked through the entire body. We started with the lower body and we did a good amount of external hip rotation. So those inner thighs are open. Hips are a little bit more open than when we first began. Back is open. And shoulders. If you feel like you've overcommitted, back up a step. That just happened to me. So I thought I would share. Oh, we're also reversing the blood flow in the legs. So your feet are above you, head's below the heart. And bring the knees in toward the chest. Close the eyes, maybe rock side to side. Two options for Shavasana. Start with soles of the feet on the mat. Heel toe them a little bit wider so they're toward the edges of the mat and let the knees touch. So you knock the knees together in the center of the mat. This is a good one for any lower back stuff. It's also comfortable if you don't have any lower back stuff. So this is option A. Option B is your traditional Shavasana. Extend the legs out in front of you. Let the toes turn out. Maybe lift the chest up to get the shoulder blades underneath you. So either one's okay for Shavasana. If you're okay with the legs out in front of you and it doesn't bother your lower back, that's recommended. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out the mouth. Let it go. Letting go of that breath control. Letting the body go back to breathing on its own. Coming into stillness, your final relaxation pose, Shavasana. Start to find some movement in the hands and the feet. Reach the arms overhead, finding a stretch, reaching out through the legs. Walk the feet in, bending the knees. Rolling over onto your right side, you can rest the head and the arm inside the bicep or cradle the head and the arm, however you want. Using that left hand, bring yourself up to a comfortable seat, maybe a cross-legged seat, sitting up tall, eyes closed, chest lifted. Bring the hands together in front of you. Slight bow of the head. Take a moment, honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Well, we really got in there today. So hopefully you can feel that and it sets you up for a nice day and week ahead. Thanks so much for joining.